Gracie Spinks. In June of 2021, a 23-year-old woman was attacked at the stables where she kept her horse in Duckmanton, Derbyshire, England. She had reported the man who did it to police months earlier. She told them he was obsessed with her. They gave him a verbal warning and closed the case in 20 minutes. 6 weeks before the attack, someone found a bag near the stables containing knives, an axe, a hammer, and a note that read, "Do not lie." Police collected the bag and classified it as lost property. One officer described the contents as having the hallmarks of a kid's game. Gracie Spinks was a swimming instructor, lifeguard, and passionate horse rider from Chesterfield. She had been furloughed during the pandemic and taken temporary warehouse work at Expite, an e-commerce firm at Markham Vale. She competed in horse shows and kept a horse named Paddy at Blue Lodge Farm. Her father, Richard, described her as the light of their lives. Michael Sellers, her 35-year-old supervisor at Expite, became fixated on Gracie after she started working there in April of 2020. He lived with his parents in Sheffield and had no documented romantic relationships. He was described by colleagues as a loner who struggled with social interactions and became visibly agitated when rejected. An internal investigation later revealed he had stalked or harassed at least 8 other women, tracking them on social media, following them in his car, and showing up outside their homes at night. He was not a first-time offender in this behavior. He had a pattern that stretched across years and multiple victims, none of whom were connected to each other by police, and nobody connected the dots until it was too late. After Gracie firmly rejected Sellers in December of 2020, blocking him on social media after an unwanted advance, he refused to accept it. He spied on her through workplace cameras, interrogated colleagues about her movements, and was spotted parked near her stables on January 4th, 2021. Gracie reported him to Expite, and he was dismissed for gross misconduct in February. She then called Derbyshire Police's non-emergency line, telling the operator he was a complete weirdo who was obsessed with her. An officer visited Gracie, then gave Sellers only words of advice. No risk assessment, no safeguarding plan, no arrest, and no protection order were pursued. A sergeant reviewed the case for approximately 20 minutes and closed it, classifying Sellers as low risk. How does a bag containing weapons, a threatening note, and a receipt traceable to a known suspect get classified as lost property? On June 18, 2021, Sellers drove from Sheffield to the stables before dawn and concealed himself under a tarpaulin. When Gracie arrived to tend Paddy shortly after 7 that morning, he attacked her with a serrated knife, inflicting 10 wounds. The fatal one severing a neck artery. She had defensive injuries on both hands. Sellers was found 150 meters away. He had taken his own life by gas asphyxiation. A note at his home blamed Gracie. The IOPC found 5 officers had cases to answer. At disciplinary hearings in November of 2022, allegations against the initial responding officer and the sergeant who closed the case were found not proven. 2 constables involved in the bag incident received written warnings. A sergeant had retired before proceedings could begin. A full inquest held in October and November of 2023 at Chesterfield Coroner's Court returned a verdict of unlawful taking. The coroner issued a prevention of future deaths report warning of a national postcode lottery in police responses to stalking. Detective Superintendent Darren Diath told the inquest, "Put simply, as a force we failed Gracie." The bag had contained a receipt that could have been traced to Sellers' address within hours. Nobody checked. The family's Gracie's Law campaign gathered over 105,000 signatures, triggering a Westminster Hall debate. Derbyshire Constabulary has since appointed a stalking coordinator and created advocate roles. In November of 2024, a footpath near the site was renamed Gracie Spink's Way. That case saw police dismiss a bag of weapons as a child's game. But the next one involves a caller who tormented a woman for months, knew every detail of her life, and then phoned her family for 4 years after she was gone. Dorothy Jane Scott. Beginning around October of 1979, a 31-year-old single mother in Stanton, California, started receiving anonymous phone calls from a man who alternated between professing love and threatening to cut her into pieces so no one would ever find her. The caller knew intimate details of her daily routine: what she wore, where she went, who she spoke with. She told her mother she recognized the voice, but could not place it. He once left a dead red rose on her windshield. She moved 3 times in 7 months. The caller always found her. She enrolled in self-defense classes a week before she vanished. Dorothy Jane Scott worked as a secretary at Swinger's Psych Shop in Anaheim, a store formerly owned by her father, Jacob. She was universally described as kind, devout, and family-oriented. She lived with her 4-year-old son, Sean, and her aunt. Her brother, Jim, said she exemplified the word give. She did not drink. She did not use substances. She kept to herself and took care of the people around her. She was the last person anyone would have expected to vanish. And yet, someone had been tracking her movements with a level of detail that suggested he was watching her every single day. On the evening of May 28, 1980, Dorothy drove a co-worker who had been bitten by a black widow spider to UC Irvine Medical Center with colleague Pam Head. The spider bite was unusual enough that only a handful of people knew about it that night. After the co-worker was treated and discharged around 11 that evening, Dorothy went to the parking lot to retrieve her car. She never returned. Her colleagues watched from the hospital entrance as a car matching her white 1973 Toyota station wagon sped past them with headlights blazing, moving far too fast. They did not see who was behind the wheel. At approximately 4:30 the next morning, the car was found burning in an alley in Santa Ana, 10 miles from the hospital. Dorothy was gone. The calls then shifted to her mother, Vera. About a week after the disappearance, a man said, "I have got her." On June 12, 1980, the same day the Orange County Register published the story, a caller told managing editor Pat Riley, "I ended her life. She was my love." He knew unpublished details, that the co-worker had a spider bite and that Dorothy had changed her scarf from black to red. For the next 4 years, calls came almost every Wednesday afternoon. In April of 1984, Dorothy's father answered for the first time. The caller hung up and the call stopped, permanently. Who calls a victim's family once a week for 4 years, then stops the moment someone new picks up the phone? On August 6, 1984, partial remains were found near Santa Ana Canyon Road in Anaheim Hills. Scattered bones partially charred by a 1982 brush fire. A turquoise ring was identified by Vera as Dorothy's. A wristwatch had stopped at 12:30 in the morning on May 29th, roughly 1 hour after she was last seen alive. Remains were confirmed through dental records on August 14th. The cause could not be determined due to the condition of the remains. Whatever happened to Dorothy Jane Scott between the parking lot and the burning car, the physical evidence could not tell the full story. Only the caller knew, and he stopped talking the moment someone new picked up the phone. No arrests have ever been made. The strongest unofficial suspect, Mike Butler, whose sister worked at the shop and who was reportedly fixated on Dorothy, passed away from cancer on June 28, 2014. Dorothy's son, Sean, has publicly stated he believes Butler was responsible based on the pattern of behavior and proximity. Jacob passed away in 1994. Vera passed away in 2002. Neither parent lived to see an arrest. The case remains actively listed on the Orange County Sheriff's Cold Case page. No new breakthroughs have been reported. After 45 years, the caller has never been identified, and the Wednesday afternoon calls remain one of the most chilling details in American cold case history. That case has remained open for over 4 decades. But the next one was solved immediately, and its aftermath rewrote the law in every state in America. Rebecca Schaefer. On July 18, 1989, a 21-year-old actress opened her apartment door in the Fairfax district of Los Angeles. She was expecting a script delivery. Instead, the man standing there was someone who had traveled overnight by bus from Tucson, Arizona, carrying a loaded revolver, a copy of The Catcher in the Rye, and an autographed photo she had once sent him. He had been to her building once already that morning. She had been polite. He left, ate breakfast at a nearby diner, and came back. When she opened the door the second time, visibly annoyed, he shot her once in the chest at point-blank range. She collapsed, repeating, "Why? Why?" She was pronounced dead at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. Rebecca Lucille Schaefer was best known for playing Patty Russell on the CBS sitcom My Sister Sam, opposite Pam Dawber from 1986 to 1988. She had appeared in Woody Allen's Radio Days and was, on the morning of her passing, preparing to audition for the role of Mary Corleone in The Godfather Part 3. She was dating director Brad Silberling, who later made the film Moonlight Mile, inspired by her loss. Robert John Bardo, born January 2, 1970, was a 19-year-old high school dropout from Tucson. The youngest of 7 children in a troubled military family, he had been placed in a facility at 15 for emotional problems and was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. He worked as a janitor before fixating on Schaefer. Bardo had pursued child peace activist Samantha Smith and written letters to Mark David Chapman in prison. He first saw Schaefer in a 1986 promotional spot and became immediately consumed. He wrote fan letters. She personally responded to one, writing that his letter was one of the nicest she had ever received. In 1987, Bardo traveled to Warner Brothers Studios, carrying a teddy bear, seeking Schaefer. Security turned him away at the gate. He returned a month later, carrying a knife, and threatened security guards who blocked his path. Neither visit was reported to Schaefer. She was never told that someone had come to her workplace twice, the second time armed, asking for her by name. After seeing her in a romantic scene in a 1989 film, Bardo's fixation turned to rage. He viewed it as a betrayal. He hired a detective agency in Tucson, paying $250 to obtain her home address through California Department of Motor Vehicles records. At the time, DMV records were publicly accessible. Anyone could pay a small fee and walk out with a celebrity's home address. His brother Edward purchased a revolver on his behalf, no questions asked. How does a man visit a studio twice, once with a weapon, and nobody tells the person he is fixated on? The next day, Bardo was arrested running through traffic on Interstate 10 in Tucson, shouting that he had done it. He confessed immediately, prosecutor, Marcia Clark, who would later become known for the O.J. Simpson trial, tried the case. On October 29, 1991, Bardo was convicted of first-degree taking with the special circumstance of lying in wait. He was sentenced to life without parole. The aftermath reshaped the legal landscape of an entire country. On September 28, 1990, California enacted Penal Code Section 646.9, America's first anti-stalking statute. For the first time, the act of repeatedly following, threatening, or surveilling someone became a standalone criminal offense. Within 3 years, 30 states passed their own versions. Today, all 50 states have such laws on the books, and every single one traces its legislative origin to what happened at Rebecca Schaeffer's front door. Congress passed the Driver's Privacy Protection Act in 1994, prohibiting DMV disclosure of home addresses to the public, directly closing the loophole Bardo had exploited. The LAPD created a dedicated threat management unit, the first specialized squad in the country designed to assess and intervene in stalking cases before they escalated to the point of no return. Bardo remains at Avenal State Prison in California. In 2007, he was attacked by another inmate at Mule Creek State Prison, but recovered from his injuries. He has no possibility of parole. He will spend the rest of his natural life behind bars. Rebecca Schaeffer was 21 years old. She had an audition that morning for a role that could have defined her career. She opened her door because she thought someone was delivering a script. She had no way of knowing that the polite young man she had spoken to an hour earlier had gone to a diner, eaten breakfast, and come back to finish what he had traveled overnight to do. That case created America's first anti-stalking law. But the next one would show that even when laws exist, the people enforcing them can become the problem. A woman reported her stalker 5 times. The police fined her for it. Shauna Grice. Between February and August of 2016, a 19-year-old woman in Port Slade, near Brighton, East Sussex, made 5 separate complaints to Sussex police about a man who was following her, tracking her car, and breaking into her home. Instead of protecting her, police issued her a £90 fine for wasting their time. 5 months later, the man she had reported entered her bedroom and took her life. Shauna Grice worked in the accounts department at Palmer and Harvey. Her mother, Sharon, described her as beautiful, bright, and bubbly. Her long-term boyfriend was Ashley Cook. In the summer of 2015, during a brief separation from Cook, she met Michael Lane, a 27-year-old mechanic. They had a short, intermittent relationship. When she ended it around Christmas of 2015, Lane told a friend, "She will pay for what she has done." Lane placed a GPS tracker on Shauna's car, slashed her tires, and then helpfully fixed them and left an anonymous note on Cook's car revealing the past relationship. On March 24, 2016, Lane chased her down the street, grabbed her phone, and pulled her hair. He was arrested and cautioned. But then the police turned on Shauna. PC Trevor Godfrey concluded her complaint was a smokescreen to disguise her affair and issued her the £90 fixed penalty notice for wasting police time because she had not initially disclosed her past involvement with Lane. On July 9, 2016, Lane used a stolen key to enter Shauna's home at 6 in the morning and stood in her room watching her as she lay still, pretending to sleep, hearing his breathing in the darkness. She did not move. She did not scream. She waited for him to leave, and then she reported it. He received only a police caution. On July 12th, she reported Lane following her in his car again. The case was classified as low risk and closed by letter. A letter sent through the post to a woman who had already told police 5 times that a man was tracking her car, entering her home with a stolen key, and standing over her while she slept. On August 4th, she saw Lane outside her home but did not call police, telling a friend she feared they would not believe her because of the fine. The system had taught her that reporting was not only futile but punishable. What happens when the person a victim fears most is not the stalker, but the system she has already asked for help 5 times? On the morning of August 25th, 2016, Lane left home wearing a disguise, a high-visibility jacket, and peaked cap. After her housemates departed for work, he entered her bedroom, took a knife from the kitchen, and attacked her, severing a major artery. He then withdrew 60 pounds from her bank account at a nearby machine, returned, moved her body onto the bed, doused it with fuel he had purchased the previous day, and set the room on fire. Her body was discovered by Ashley Cook's father. Lane was arrested the same day at his workplace, still carrying her house keys. At Lewis Crown Court in March of 2017, the jury deliberated only 2 hours before finding Lane guilty. The judge sentenced him to life with a minimum of 25 years, calling it a cold-hearted act with a high degree of calculated planning. He stated, "She was treated as the wrongdoer, and Michael Lane was treated as the victim." Those words echoed through the courtroom and into the national press. Sussex police revealed Lane had been reported by 13 other women over the years. 13 women across multiple jurisdictions had described the same pattern of behavior from the same man. His 2010 arrest for grooming a young person had never been cross-referenced with any of Shayna's complaints. None of the reports were ever connected. Each one existed in isolation, as if each woman was the first person to ever mention his name. The IOPC investigation issued 16 learning recommendations. Nationally, the NPCC issued guidance prohibiting fixed penalty notices in stalking cases. The Stalking Protection Act of 2019 created civil protection orders, effective March of 2020. Lane's earliest possible parole is 2042. That case ended with a law that stopped police from fining stalking victims. But the next one would involve a teenager whose ex-boyfriend staged a fake kidnapping, stole a firearm, and then fired through her bedroom wall while she slept. Emma Walker. On November 21st, 2016, between midnight and 1 in the morning, 2 shots were fired through the exterior wall of a bedroom in Knoxville, Tennessee. The person inside was asleep. 1 round struck her in the left side of her head, behind her ear. Her mother found her unresponsive at 6 that morning. The shooter was her ex-boyfriend, an 18-year-old college football player who had driven 25 miles from his dormitory to carry out the act. Emma Jane Walker was a junior at Central High School in Knoxville, a cheerleader, honor student, and member of the National Beta Club who dreamed of becoming a NICU nurse. Her mother, Jill, described her as compassionate and kind. Friends called her Sunshine. She was 16 years old. William Riley Gall had dated Emma for roughly 2 years. A wide receiver on the football team, Gall initially seemed charming, but grew controlling over time, dictating who Emma could see, where she could go, what she could wear, and who she could talk to at school. He monitored her social media and reacted with anger when she interacted with other people. They broke up and reconciled multiple times, each cycle more volatile than the last. He once attempted to end his own life after a breakup, a pattern consistent with using emotional crises to maintain control. By October of 2016, Emma's parents recognized the danger and banned all contact. Around Halloween, she told friends she was done for good. She meant it. He did not accept it. In the days before, Gall orchestrated increasingly desperate schemes designed to create confusion and alternate explanations. On November 18th, he staged a fake kidnapping, calling Emma screaming that two men had thrown him in a van, then appearing lying in a ditch outside a friend's home with fake injuries. The stunt was designed to keep Emma emotionally engaged and afraid. The same day, he stole a 9mm firearm from his grandfather's vehicle. On November 19th, a figure dressed entirely in black appeared at Emma's home, repeatedly ringing the doorbell late at night. Emma texted friends that she was scared and thought she was going to die. She knew something was wrong. Prosecutors later argued Gall orchestrated both events, the fake kidnapping and the doorbell visits, to create alternate suspects for what he was already planning. If something happened to Emma, he wanted someone else to be blamed for it. Before leaving his dormitory that night, he called a friend asking how to remove fingerprints from a firearm. He drove 25 miles to the Walker home in the middle of the night and fired 2 shots through the exterior wall of Emma's bedroom. He did not enter the house. He fired blind through the wall. Forensic technicians discovered the entry hole in the siding, and shell casings were found in the yard outside her window. What would have happened if Emma's friends had not decided to take matters into their own hands the very next day? Friends Alex McCarty and Noah Walton became convinced Gall was lying about his innocence almost immediately. His grief did not ring true. His stories had gaps. On November 22nd, detectives equipped the 2 young men with hidden cameras and microphones and sent them into a conversation with Gall. In a remarkable operation carried out by teenagers, Walton lured Gall to his house, where Gall was recorded coaching friends on how to mislead investigators and keep their stories consistent. Gall then led them to his stepfather's basement to retrieve the firearm. Hidden in a trash bag with gloves, black clothing, and tape matching the outfit worn by the figure in black who had appeared at Emma's door. Within a minute of McCarty seeing the firearm, officers moved in and arrested Gall at the River Bluff Wildlife Area overlooking the Tennessee River. 2 friends, wearing wires, had done what an investigation had not yet been able to accomplish at trial in May of 2018. The jury convicted Gall of first-degree taking after roughly 5 hours of deliberation. He was sentenced to life, meaning in Tennessee 51 years before parole eligibility, with an earliest possible release in 2069. The Tennessee Court of Criminal Appeals upheld the conviction in February of 2023. Knox County observes Emma Walker Day annually on March 24th. And East Tennessee Children's Hospital dedicated a NICU room in her honor. That case was cracked by 2 teenagers who wired themselves and walked into a room with a suspect. But the next one involved a fixation that lasted 22 years, beginning when the stalker was just a child. Mary Lynn Witherspoon. On November 14th, 2003, a 53-year-old French teacher was found in her home on Trad Street in Charleston, South Carolina. She had been bound, harmed, and strangled. The man responsible was someone she had known since he was a child. He had been fixated on her for 22 years. Mary Lynn Keels Witherspoon was a high school valedictorian with a master's degree who taught at Charlestown Academy. She was described as the epitome of a Southern belle, gracious, generous, and strikingly beautiful. She lived in Charleston's prestigious South of Broad neighborhood. Edmunds Tennant Brown IV first encountered Witherspoon when he was approximately 10 years old. She was dating his father, attorney Edmunds Tennant Brown III, from 1981 to roughly 1988. The boy developed a fixation that never relented. After the relationship with his father ended, young Tennant began showing up uninvited at Witherspoon's home. In 1989, someone broke in and took clothes and personal items from her suitcase. Her mother immediately identified Tennant as the person responsible. He returned the items when confronted, but the pattern was already established. Brown resurfaced in 2001 after a decade of drifting through the Coast Guard in various jobs. His fixation had not faded. It had calcified. In April of 2003, Witherspoon noticed personal items disappearing from her laundry line. She installed a security system and purchased pepper spray, both signs of a woman who understood the threat was real and escalating. In June of 2003, she spotted Brown in her backyard carrying a pillowcase filled with her clothing and pressed charges. He was incarcerated for burglary. While locked up, Brown wrote notes and journal entries that included detailed plans to acquire a weapon and take care of the woman he had been fixated on for over 2 decades. These writings were discovered by investigators after the fact. Nobody flagged them while he was incarcerated. On November 10, 2003, Brown was released by Charleston's mental health court for outpatient treatment. He listed Witherspoon's Trad Street address as his own residence on the release paperwork and walked out of the facility. Witherspoon had registered for South Carolina's victim notification system, but the automated calls failed to reach her. A mailed notification arrived after her passing, and it contained incorrect information stating Brown had been transferred rather than released. How does a system designed to protect victims release a man directly to his target's address without anyone noticing? 4 days later, Brown broke into her home as she prepared for work. He knocked her to the floor, dragged her upstairs, bound her hands and feet with duct tape, harmed her, and strangled her. Her body was left in the bathtub. Investigators found ransacked rooms and evidence he had made himself breakfast in her kitchen afterward, sitting in her house as if it were his own. He took her vehicle. When colleagues raised the alarm after Witherspoon failed to show up for class, police entered the home and found the scene. Witherspoon's family immediately named Brown as the suspect because they had been warning authorities about him for years. Police staked out the house, and within 20 minutes, Brown returned wearing her clothing and carrying her keys and panic button. His identification listed her address. He walked directly into the hands of officers who were waiting for him. Wearing the evidence on his body, Brown pleaded guilty and was sentenced on July 13, 2004, to life without parole. The family had requested prosecutors not pursue the maximum penalty, choosing instead a sentence that guaranteed he would never be released. Brown remains incarcerated at Allendale Correctional Institution in Fairfax, South Carolina. In 2016, Brown filed a federal lawsuit demanding the state fund medical procedures, which was denied under South Carolina law. The case prompted Mary Lynn's Law, Act No. 92 of 2005, signed by Governor Mark Sanford. The law enhanced stalking penalties, required human follow-up for victim notifications rather than automated calls that could go unanswered, and mandated mental health evaluations for stalking suspects before release. Every provision in that law traces back to a specific failure in how the system handled Edmunds Tennant Brown. If you have made it this far and enjoy content like this, consider subscribing and leaving a like. It helps more than you think and keeps us bringing you stories like these. That case exposed a notification system that told a victim her stalker had been transferred when he had actually been released. But the next one would involve a teenager whose attacker whispered her identity with her last breath, and a legal saga that has lasted over 3 decades. Lori Show. On the morning of December 20th, 1991, a 16-year-old sophomore at Conestoga Valley High School in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, was attacked inside her condominium while her mother was lured away by a fake phone call. When her mother returned and found her barely alive, the girl whispered, "Michelle did it. I love you." She passed away at Lancaster General Hospital. Lori Michelle Show lived with her mother Hazel at 92 Black Oak Drive in East Lampeter Township. She was described as quiet, kind, and trusting. She tutored classmates, enjoyed Bible study, and mostly kept to herself. The trouble began in the summer of 1991. Lisa Michelle Lambert, approximately 18, was in a volatile relationship with Lawrence Yunkin, 20. During a break, Yunkin spent time with Lori. On July 31st, 1991, Lori filed a police report alleging Yunkin had harmed her. When Lambert and Yunkin reunited, Lambert developed an obsessive hatred toward Lori and enlisted friend Tabitha Buck, 17, a recent transfer student with few friends. The harassment escalated over months. Lambert made screaming phone calls at all hours, confronted Lori at her workplace, and struck her at a mall in front of witnesses. Buck punched Lori at school and at a community event. Lambert told multiple people she intended to slit Lori's throat, using those exact words. Friends heard the threats clearly. School administrators were aware of the conflict. Lori's mother, Hazel, contacted police, but Pennsylvania had no anti-stalking laws at the time. There was no legal mechanism to intervene based on threats alone, no matter how specific or how frequently they were made. The harassment continued unchecked for months, growing more brazen each time until the morning it became something no law could undo. Lambert and Buck arranged for a fake phone call to Hazel's show, purporting to be from a school guidance counselor requesting an urgent meeting about Lori's academic performance. The call was convincing enough that Hazel left the house. After she departed, Yunkin drove Lambert and Buck to the condo and waited outside with the engine running. The two women attacked Lori, inflicting a 5-inch wound to the throat, severing a major artery, a wound puncturing a lung, a deep gash to her thigh, blunt trauma to the head, and over 28 defensive injuries. She fought back with everything she had. When Hazel returned around 7:25 that morning and found Lori barely alive on the floor, her daughter whispered her final words, "Michelle did it. I love you." She was able to name her attacker with her last breath. She passed away at Lancaster General Hospital shortly after. All three were arrested within 36 hours at a bowling alley. The speed of the arrests stood in stark contrast to the months of harassment that had preceded the act, during which no one had been able to stop what was clearly escalating towards something irreversible. In July of 1992, Lambert was convicted and sentenced to life without parole. Buck was convicted of second-degree charges and also received life without parole. Yunkin pleaded no contest to third-degree charges after his original plea arrangement collapsed due to perjury. He received 10 to 20 years. The case then took one of the most remarkable turns in American criminal law. In April of 1997, federal Judge Stuart Dalzell overturned Lambert's conviction, finding her actually innocent and citing wholesale prosecutorial misconduct. Dalzell's ruling stated that evidence had been suppressed, including Hazel Show's own account of seeing Yunkin at the scene. In January of 1998, the Third Circuit Court of Appeals reversed Dalzell's ruling on procedural grounds, holding that his review exceeded the scope permitted under federal habeas law. Lambert was returned to prison. All subsequent appeals, including petitions to the Supreme Court in 2003 and 2005, were denied. The question of whether Lambert was actually innocent or merely the beneficiary of a flawed trial has divided legal scholars and journalists for over 3 decades. Lambert remains incarcerated. She earned a bachelor's degree from Boston University in 2011 and published a book maintaining her innocence in 2016. Buck was paroled on December 21, 2019, after the Miller v. Alabama ruling deemed mandatory life sentences for juvenile offenders unconstitutional. She was resentenced to 28 years to life in 2017. Youngkin was paroled in 2004 after serving nearly 12 years. He has remained out of public view. Hazel Show's advocacy was instrumental in Pennsylvania's first anti-stalking law, enacted in June of 1993. The law exists because Lori's mother fought for it after learning that the months of threats her daughter endured had no legal remedy. That case produced Pennsylvania's first anti-stalking law and a legal debate that still has not ended. But the next one would involve 300 internet searches, a stolen identification badge, and a parking garage that became a crime scene. Michelle Lee. On May 27, 2011, a 26-year-old nursing student at Samuel Merritt University in Oakland, California, told a colleague she was going to her car in the third-floor parking garage at Kaiser Hayward around 6:45 that evening. She never returned. Her blood was found on the garage floor. Someone called the emergency room posing as Michelle, claiming her father had suffered a medical emergency. She had been months from completing her degree. Michelle Hoang Thi Lei's family had immigrated from Vietnam as refugees. Her mother, a nurse practitioner, had passed away roughly a decade earlier. Michelle, who maintained straight A grades, wanted to follow her mother's path. Her cousin Christine Din described her as a ray of sunshine. Giselle Diwag Esteban, 27, was a former high school friend from San Diego who had introduced Michelle to Scott Marasigan at San Francisco State University. Michelle and Scott dated briefly in 2003, but broke up amicably and remained platonic friends afterward. There was nothing between them. But Esteban could not accept that. She began dating Scott, and they had a daughter in 2005. After their relationship deteriorated and Scott gained full custody of their daughter in August of 2010, Esteban became consumed by the unfounded belief that Scott and Michelle were romantically involved. The belief was baseless. Scott and Michelle had not been together in years. But Esteban constructed an entire narrative around it and let that narrative justify everything that followed. FBI forensics later recovered approximately 300 internet searches for Michelle Lee from Esteban's computer, along with searches for methods of causing undetectable harm, how to induce specific medical emergencies without leaving a trace, and where to obtain restricted substances. The search history painted a picture of someone who had been planning for months. The threatening messages escalated throughout early 2011. In February, Esteban texted Scott that Michelle had dug her grave by being a homewrecker. In March, she wrote that Michelle would not be an issue for much longer. The language was not ambiguous. It was a declaration of intent, sent in writing to the one person who could have connected the dots. In the days before the parking garage, Esteban stole a faculty identification badge from Samuel Merritt, called the hospital 3 times, impersonating different people to determine Michelle's exact schedule and shifts, and spent hours conducting surveillance of the Kaiser parking garage, learning the layout, the camera positions, and the traffic patterns. She planned this with the precision of someone who had thought about it for a long time. What does it take for 300 searches, stolen credentials, and explicit written threats to result in an intervention before someone walks to their car and never comes back. Cell tower record showed both Esteban's and Michelle's phones traveling together to a remote area between Pleasanton and Sunol after the garage incident. The phones moved in tandem, minute by minute, along the same route, stopping at the same location. Michelle's vehicle was found the next day with Esteban's DNA on the steering wheel and the stolen faculty badge sitting on the passenger seat, left behind in what appeared to be haste rather than oversight. Esteban was arrested on September 7, 2011. 10 days later, Michelle's remains were found during a volunteer search on September 17th in the remote area the cell tower data had pointed to. The discovery was made by Carrie McGonigal, whose own teenage daughter, Amber Dubois, had been taken in 2009. The fact that a grieving mother searching for closure in her own loss was the one who found Michelle's remains added another layer of weight to an already devastating case. Dental records confirmed the identification on September 19th. On October 29th, 2012, a jury convicted Esteban of first-degree charges. She was sentenced on December 10th to 25 years to life. The judge stated he saw no hint of remorse. The California Court of Appeal affirmed the conviction on June 1st, 2015. Esteban remains incarcerated and will first become eligible for parole around 2037. That case was built on cell tower data, a stolen badge, and 300 searches that painted an unmistakable picture. But the next one would involve a country where stalking was not even a crime, a victim who wrote a will at 21, and police officers who forged documents to avoid investigating. Shiori Ino. On March 30th, 1999, a 21-year-old university student in Ageo, Saitama Prefecture, Japan, wrote a will. She told her friends, "If I am taken, the person responsible is definitely Komatsu." 7 months later, a hired attacker ended her life in front of a train station in broad daylight. The police had her evidence. They had her recordings. They had forged her paperwork to avoid acting on any of it. Shiori Ino was a student at Atomi Gakuen Women's University. She loved sunflowers. On January 6, 1999, she met Kazuhito Komatsu at a game center near Omiya Station. Using a false name, he claimed to be a 23-year-old entrepreneur. In reality, he ran multiple illicit establishments in Ikebukuro with his older brother Takeshi, a firefighter moonlighting on the other side of the law. Within weeks, Komatsu began showering Ino with expensive gifts and erupting in violent rages when she tried to refuse them. In March, she discovered a hidden camera in his apartment. When she confronted him, he punched holes in walls near her face, demanded payment for returned gifts, and threatened her future. She was 21 years old, and she was writing a will. On June 14, 1999, after Ino ended the relationship, Komatsu, Takeshi, and an associate confronted the family at their home with fabricated accusations designed to humiliate and intimidate. Ino secretly recorded the entire encounter on a device concealed in the room. The recording captured threats, demands, and language that left no ambiguity about the danger she was in. The next day, she brought the recording to Ajo police station. She walked in with physical evidence, a recording of threats made inside her own home. Despite one junior officer's visible alarm at the content, senior officers told her she had no case and sent her home. Over the following months, the family received approximately 20 silent calls per day. Their phone rang constantly. Hundreds of slanderous flyers were distributed near their home, near the university campus, and along the commuting routes Ino used every day. Roughly 800 defamatory letters were sent to her father's workplace, arriving in batches, week after week, designed to destroy his professional reputation. The family brought this evidence to police repeatedly. They brought the letters. They brought the flyers. They brought the call logs. Officers took no meaningful action. Then, in an act that would later result in criminal convictions, officers at a JO police station physically crossed out the word complaint on Eno's formal filing and replaced it with incident report using a forged family seal. By reclassifying the document, they removed the legal obligation to investigate. They did this deliberately, with the explicit purpose of avoiding the work that Eno's complaint would have required. It was not an error. It was a decision. How does a police department forge a victim's own paperwork to avoid doing their job, and then face no consequences until after she is gone? On June 22, 1999, Takeshi Komatsu offered a former organized crime associate named Yoshifumi Kubota a 20 million yen contract to carry out the act. On October 26, 1999, at approximately 12:50 in the afternoon, Kubota attacked Eno with a survival knife in front of JR Okagawa Station as she arrived for afternoon classes. She did not survive. Police initially launched a disinformation campaign, feeding media false claims about Eno's personal life. The actual perpetrators were identified not by police, but by investigative journalist Kiyoshi Shimizu of Focus magazine, who tracked them down and provided photographs to authorities. Kubota was arrested in December. Kazuhito Komatsu was found deceased on January 27, 2000, at a lake in Hokkaido. Takeshi Komatsu was sentenced to life imprisonment, upheld through the Supreme Court in 2006. 3 police officers were fired and convicted of forging official documents. The case was the direct catalyst for Japan's Anti-Stalking Act, enacted in November of 2000. As of 2025, Japan recorded 1,546 stalking cases and 22,881 victim consultations, both all-time highs. Eno's father, Kenichi, now 75, has delivered over 120 lectures at police academies across 40 prefectures. At a 2024 symposium, he said he will keep looking forward until Shiori appears before him, smiling, saying it is okay. That case gave Japan its first anti-stalking law and sent 3 officers to court for forging a victim's own complaint. But the final case on this list would cross into a different kind of territory entirely, involving social media, a fabricated business offer, and predators who had already done it 5 times before. Cynthia Osokogu. On July 21, 2012, a 24-year-old graduate student and small business owner flew from Abuja to Lagos, Nigeria, to meet 2 men who had contacted her over months through Facebook and BlackBerry Messenger. They had offered a business proposal to help her source cheaper goods for her fashion boutique. They offered to fly her to Lagos and provide hotel accommodation. She checked into the Cosmilla Hotel in Festac Town. She never checked out. Cynthia Udoka Osokogu was a graduate of Nasarawa State University pursuing a master's in public administration while running a boutique called Dress Code in Kefi. The youngest child and only daughter of retired Major General Frank Osokogu, she was described by CNN as possessing beauty, intelligence, and business savvy. She was building something. She was trusting, and the men who contacted her had done this before. Okumo Echezona Nwabufor, 33, a self-described car dealer and part-time University of Lagos student, had spent months cultivating the connection alongside his cousin Olisaloka Ezige, 23. Through their conversations, they discovered she was a general's daughter and assumed she would be carrying significant cash when she traveled. The business proposal was fabricated. The hotel room was the destination. Everything about the offer was designed to bring her to a specific location at a specific time. On July 22nd, the two men drugged Cynthia's drink with a sedative. They restrained her with chains and tape, blocked her airway, and strangled her. Chief pathologist Professor John Oladapo Obafunwa determined the cause of passing was asphyxiation. After spending the night with the body in the room, the suspects left and later called the hotel to have it removed. Their language when making that call was callous beyond description. Cynthia was their sixth victim. They confessed to belonging to a network that lured women via social media, targeted them based on perceived wealth or family connections, and carried out the same operation repeatedly across Lagos. 6 women had been harmed before Cynthia using the same method, the same platforms, and the same hotel strategy. The fact that 5 other women had been harmed before her and nobody had connected the pattern. Nobody had flagged the hotel. Nobody had noticed the disappearances clustering around the same 2 men is one of the most troubling aspects of this case. The system only responded when a general's daughter did not come home. How does a network operate across a major city, target 6 women through social media using the same method each time, and never once trigger an investigation until someone with a powerful family is the one who vanishes? Police traced the crime through phone call logs, as one suspect had answered Cynthia's phone and demanded a 20 million naira ransom from the family, a critical mistake that gave investigators a direct connection. CCTV footage from the hotel, BlackBerry pin tracking, and video-recorded confessions built the rest of the case. Lead investigator ACP Dan Okoro notably rejected a 15 million naira bribe to compromise the investigation, a detail that says as much about the system he was working within as the crime itself. The bribe was offered openly, as if corrupting the process was a routine transaction. After a 4-year trial at Lagos State High Court, both men were convicted on March 23, 2017. Nwabufor and Edziye were each sentenced to death under the criminal law of Lagos State, plus additional terms. Nigeria maintains an unofficial moratorium on executions. Both remain on death row. The case became Nigeria's most prominent social media crime, ranked among the top 12 news stories of 2012. The regulatory agency partially restricted the sedative used in the attack in January of 2013, citing this case specifically. Cynthia's story was referenced repeatedly in Arguments for Nigeria's Cybercrimes Act of 2015 and remains a cautionary benchmark for online safety awareness across West Africa. Her father, Major General Osokogu, became a public advocate for digital safety education in the years following the trial. Cynthia was 24 years old. She was building a business. She accepted a meeting that appeared professional and legitimate. And the men who set the trap had practiced it 5 times before anyone with a platform large enough to demand answers noticed they were gone. 10 cases, 10 people who saw it coming. In 6 of them, the victims told police exactly who they were afraid of. In 3, officers were disciplined, fired, or convicted for failing to act. Laws were written because of these names. Systems were reformed. And yet the pattern continues, because the distance between having a law and enforcing it remains the most dangerous space a person can occupy. This was all from our side today. Thanks for watching. Click here to check out another video.